If the team would come up and join me here now. Harriet's given us an extra 10 minutes, so we'll have time for a bit of panel session. Give Hakan time to hobble up. Okay. Thanks. So, does anyone have any questions, general or specific, for any of our panel members? Yes, so there's one up there.
Hi, I have a question about the difference between traditional venture capital and corporate venture capital. So I've been told that there are lots of different types of CVC, and that some are more patient than others, and some are more strategic, and some are more like traditional venture capital. But I guess I'm just curious what your perspectives are on that and how you think entrepreneurs should think about that as they're choosing the type of money they want to invest in their companies.
So I suggest that our corporate guys take that first, but I might then ask Robert and Eric just to talk about how they feel they fit with venture capital as well.
They do come in different forms. So if you take SR1, part of GSK, for an example, we're an evergreen fund. We're pretty much agnostic in terms of therapeutic area. We're very much sort of financial, but strategic in the sense that we're not going to invest in things that GSK is just not that interested in. But generally, we're agnostic. Some of the corporate VCs are very, very focused on specific therapeutic areas because their task and their remit in life is to fill particular holes in the pipeline of the parent company. We're not like that at all. So you've got a real dichotomy there of some who are very clearly on a mission to fill in gaps in their pipeline, whereas we are not. We are absolutely, completely agnostic. We're just interested in great science and innovation. Then you've got size differences. You know, we're really unshackled by size of investment. Some have got a limited fund size, and therefore they will have some constraints. So you're absolutely right. When you put a syndicate together, you've got to think really carefully about the mix, because the corporates actually tend to play nicely together nowadays, and we're in syndicates, you know, with, one company we exited recently called Alios had 4 corporates in there, which is incredible, really. So you can go from that extreme situation to one where you've got 1 or 2. So I think they are all different, and you made a really good point, which is you need to think about the combination when you're putting them together. And difference to institutional, maybe Hakan wants to say something about the difference between corporates and institutions.
So, I mean, personally, I have been on both sides of the fence, let's say, and on Merck Serono Ventures, we are more strategic than SR1 is, perhaps, but different enough from some of the other corporate venture firms that we're trying to fill in the future gaps in the pipeline of Merck Serono. If, you know, considering a pharma turnover, and no tweets, please, you know, who knows what's going to be happening in a couple of years anyway on what pharma is interested in. It's always an open question. But as David said, it comes in all colors and shapes. That you know, some people have more money, less money, in different areas of interest. But when it comes to syndication, I think what we see as more successful, and there is actually some research on this that came out recently, and we kind of went and redid it to see if it's really true. But what is considered as a success for companies, exit or high value collaborations, a majority of those that were considered successful actually had a mixture of CVCs and let's call them independent venture capital firms on their investor list. So
the question was the difference between corporate venture and venture capital. But I just wonder, Robert, whether you wanted to talk about how Cambridge Innovation Capital fits within this mix.
Well, we're non-corporate, but I think just from Hakan's point, it depends on which surveys you read, but if you look at returns of companies which have got purely non-corporates, it's at one level. If you look at those who've got one corporate venture company, it's increased, and if they've got 2, it's increased even further, and you can kind of speculate why that is. But I think for that reason alone, you could speculate that actually they're adding value beyond just money, and that may be because of expertise, it may be about the longer term view, it may be the access to capital. But from our perspective, we're very keen to co-invest alongside corporate venture because of that added value that they bring. And the other aspect is, I think most of them, but not all corporate venture arms, have a longer-term view. They don't have to. They're often evergreen, like SR1. Not all of them are. And therefore, if it's a very early stage investment, then actually going along with other evergreens, such as the corporate, makes a lot of sense. And so, but at the same time, there's some investments where actually it's very appropriate to go for looking for a shorter time frame.
I don't know whether, Eric, you've got any perspective on this from thinking from the... yeah.
Sorry, two observations. I haven't dealt in venture capital before. I've sometimes provide technical assessments for some things that VCs want to get involved with. One thing I would comment on is that there seems to be more of a patience sometimes in VCs to fund novel science than you get actually within big pharma, where sometimes you need to deliver very quickly or you move on. And that's pretty impressive. And the other thing I would just mention is that although we're a charity, we're actually also contributing I think $5 million into a pooled VC fund with other investors, including Big Pharma. It's called the Dementia Discovery Fund, and the Department of Health, I think, are putting in $15 million as well. And I think it's a good example of very much a mixed model, that when you have a very big problem, you need to attack it in lots of different ways, and that's scientifically, but it's also in terms of funding as well. Different funding models are sometimes more appropriate for different areas of science.
Thank you. Sorry, yes, I saw you at the back first, the lady there.
David, you mentioned in your talk about startup companies having shared facilities with pharmaceutical companies. How often do you come across this nowadays? Because I've come across quite a few startups in the Cambridge area where things like HR facilities were outsourced as a way of cost-saving measures. So is that something that you come across more often now?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for instance, with Progenitor, the parent company that they were spun out of, Plasticell, is on the same site. And so they share management resources between the two companies. So sharing like finance and HR, access to screening facilities within the SBC. When the SBC first opened up, Martino's not here, is he? I hope not. You know, the first thing they turned on the screening machine, it broke down. Had to get the engineer in, then the plate washer wasn't working, and then so you're going to get a few sort of like teething problems at the start, but it really working incredibly well now. But you're right, it's really for a venture investor. I hate to say anybody in the room is in human resources, but some of these sort of central functions, it'd be great to share them, as you said, central functions like HR, finance, etc. And then we obviously use a lot of consultants to provide, you know, background resource and support, particularly around things like regulatory, where you just can't justify bringing somebody on board permanently. So, yeah, so the experience is good, and you can only be so virtual. You just got to think really carefully about what's the core of the company. And don't skin on the core of the company. Make sure you've got those really core skills that support your IP and the development of your IP.
Okay, I saw some other questions, so yeah.
In previous meetings, we'd have heard a lot of talks from antibody companies, or about antibodies, and I know, Jane, you are one of those with F-Star. But now we heard the first, or there's a couple of examples of genome companies being funded. Does that reflect what you're actually seeing in terms of demand in the market, a shift from maybe more traditional antibody therapeutic companies or technologies to genomics, or just happens to be what we've talked about today?
I'll say, Robert, do you want to start with that?
I could start with, I don't think necessarily particularly representative. Because of our geographical remit within the Cambridge cluster, we may love to invest in stem cells or gene therapy, but they're going to be precious few. As it happens, you know, we've got a world-class genome centre in the Sanger Institute, and therefore it's not surprising that we'll invest in them. We've got Cancer Research UK's here, and so we're a little bit opportunistic. So we're that biased maybe just because of our particular profile. I don't know.
I think that's also perhaps a natural evolution of how the space has gone, right? I mean, people were excited about small molecules for a while, even identifying small molecules. Then it moved on to antibody technologies that Cambridge is also very well known with Greg's work, and then antibody technologies moved towards ADCs and bispecifics, which is what F-Star is doing. So it's naturally that we're moving towards, but these two examples that at least I gave were more based on, you know, how to really kind of de-risk what you're doing. But perhaps antibodies are more moving towards clever targets or target combinations now rather than the technology itself.
I'm worried now because I'm thinking of your sheep slide. We're not all like that, but you know, there are trends. There are immuno-oncology. You could say it's ridiculous, but I mean that's probably unfair. Don't tweet me on that one, otherwise you'll get me in trouble with Monse. But you know, there's some really hot areas, and you know, there are trends and things move on, and you know, in the global space, yeah, there are some areas where we all follow each other. You know.
I mean, just one point on antibodies. What I think has been really remarkable is their potential utility for neuroscience diseases as well, because we heard Hyperion, which is an anti-tau antibody, and there are others following that, and solanezumab, which is in phase 3 trials for Alzheimer's, is an antibody. And Biogen have aducanumab, which just presented incredible data. I mean, incredible in a good way rather than an unbelievable way. So, you know, that's been quite a revolution, I think, in the field in the last 10 years.
Thank you. Miranda. Do you want to wait? Do you want to wait for the mic? Great.
Miranda Weston Smith. How does the panel think crowdfunding will shape what they do?
Who wants to go first? Eric, apparently you have a view on everything.
I don't know a huge amount about the field, so I'll lay my cards on the table. I can speak of an experience where we received a grant for a particular piece of science, which we did not fund for very good reasons that are both the charity, the specialists in the charity, and also our scientific advisory board at the time basically said, you know, this probably is not going to work, in fact, and it didn't get funded. And then that subsequently went out for crowdfunding and is receiving money. And, you know, the assessment of the science, there aren't that many people, I think, who would be able to credibly assess this area, this field. You need real specialism. You need to have been in the area for 15 years, 20 years to understand all the background literature, to know what's been done and what hasn't been done, to understand the way the scientific experiments presented were conducted, the statistics that were used, or in this case not used, to assess the outcomes. So there was a huge amount of science and technology and technique that needed to be understood before you could make a valid judgment on this piece of science. And so from my perspective, I think, you know, all of those specialists, and including me in that case, could be, of course, completely wrong. But I actually happen to believe they're probably not. And yet this is accruing a significant amount of money to conduct some experiments, which personally I think are destined to fail. And so I'm sure there are also examples of great successes in crowdsourcing. But for that particular, in the experience that I've had, I think it's been, personally, I think inappropriately used. That's been my experience.
I was just going to say that all sources of funding is good in lots of respects. You know, people often think that venture people criticise high net worth individuals. I think they've got their place in the market. I think crowdfunding's got its place in the market. I even learned in Wimbledon last week, apparently Andy Murray is like running a crowdfunding fund. So like, you know, so that's pretty impressive. So he's turned into investor already. So he's already thinking about his post his tennis career. But I'm really not an expert in the area, but I just tend to think that all these funding models have their own room in the space, you know.
I think the problem comes when it comes to dissecting who owns what in the end, because drug development is not a short or a low cost process. So you know, the amount of money that is needed to get through to approval and perhaps marketing is, well, from what I have seen, is not achievable by crowdfunding as of yet. So long as you're sure that you will have the full funding in place to get to your product, then it should be okay.
I'll just add one other thing. So I've just been sitting here reflecting on my comments. In a sense, of course, Alzheimer's Research UK, our charity, is crowdfunding. It's a crowdfunding model. So we ask people, you know, we're going to use your money wisely if you give us your money. And we are explicit about what we do fund, what we don't fund. We say, you know, we're interested in funding research for neurodegenerative disease. That will bring, we hope, benefit to patients. It's a crowdfunding model. But there is a pipeline of very high scientific critique that we get from around the world that actually then judges how that money is used, and we hope that we use it wisely. So I think in that context, of course, it's fine. What I kind of get uncomfortable with is when, you know, there are times when that avenue has been used and failed, and then a default pathway is to go elsewhere. Because there's something about that I don't like personally.
Okay, anyway, we're out of time, I'm afraid. Can I take one more question?
Just one more question.
I'm allowed one more question.
Jane, I'm here.
You're there, okay. Oh, sorry, Cam, yes.
Cam from Horizon Discovery. First of all, I'd like to say this has been a great session, and you know, the presentations have been great.
I'll pay you later.
Thank you, David. Yours was obviously the funniest, but listen, I basically think I've blinked and I'm gone into a parallel universe, because you guys are all playing very nice, you know, and I've been on many of these boards and, you know, looked opposite to VCs and had different sorts of experiences where they've got their own vested interests and very short-term interests. Now, one thing which I enjoyed with the presentations is the structure that you guys are now funding towards, where it's based on success. Because we all know historically VCs have been throwing money, and he who sticks best in terms of their portfolio gets sponsored. Others, which may require a little bit more time, get left on the wayside. But my question is centered upon, do you think with all the experiences that we've had over the last 20 years in UK biotech, we're in a better position now to think bigger rather than funding companies with a short-term view to basically get them acquired? You know, should we be thinking like our US cousins more, which is, you know, building for the future, building, you know, the billion-dollar biotech companies, because that's what Cambridge and Oxford is all about, and that's what, you know, that's what my question is to the panel.
So thank you, Cam, for your typically brief question. If you can remember. Can I ask the panelists not to follow the example, but be brief in your answers?
I think we can have a whole day on this one.
I think this is one
but let's just, you know, what I would like to do is to kind of pull down some of those mythical walls of the US versus Europe. So everybody invests for returns, right? So if you don't have the returns in the anticipated time that you promise your LPs you'll give the money back, you're in trouble, be that a company or as a venture firm. So what the US has on to their benefit is the open IPO market, where they can get their money out earlier than waiting for a sale. So that's the fundamental difference that we still need to try to build here, and mainly by attracting specialist institutional investors that will invest into public companies. That will bring us onto equal terms. And being from two independent venture firms, I think it's a little harsh to say that they're all short-viewed. Everybody needs to build up a portfolio with the right risk of, you know, this is what I'm going to return sooner, this is what I'm going to stay in longer term, because that's when I increase the value. However, plans don't always follow as you expect. So if you invest in a company expecting to get out in 2 years and they fail and they're there for 8 years, then both sides is in trouble. So, you know, you can see it as fair or unfair on both sides.
I'd just like to make, again, this is not really my world, but just a couple of comments. One is that as part of the work the charity is doing with venture capital, we've chatted to one VC company, and they actually take great ideas from around the world, but they bring them all back to Boston, Cambridge, to actually to operationalize them. That's where the science is done. And what I would like to see, and I don't know how this is mediated, but in the UK, life sciences and our universities is a real strength, and we should invest more and more money in them, and we should give, I think, academics a far better career path so that we keep the brilliant people that get into IT and get into electronics, we want them in life sciences, but we need to provide them, I think, a decent career path. And then we can start to have the sort of bioclusters that you get on the west and the east coast of the US. You walk around Cambridge and it's just, it's a pretty sterile environment in many respects, but it is just biotech after biotech after biotech after biotech. And so, I'd like us to be more like that.
I mean, you're right in some respects. I mean, we exited a company called Alios, which was bought by Johnson & Johnson for 1.75 billion, which is like killing a woolly mammoth for a venture fund, because we sort of brought it home and that's going to feed the family for a long time. But I just hope that Mission, Bicycle, F-Star, and a bunch of these other companies are our mini woolly mammoths, and we'll bring in 3 or 4 of those and then grow them up over the years and hopefully get towards that big one.
I think that the trend, I think there is a trend, and I think if you look again, coming back to the holy trinity of Lansdowne, Woodford and Invesco, and Hakan's point of trying to attract more generalists into this area, and I think they're driving that trend. And if you're looking at the trends within VC, the money that they're putting in OSI, through Mercia, through Imperial IP Group and ourselves, and then the build of the corporate venture arms, I think you are seeing longer term, not to take away from the fact there is a role for shorter term. If you look at the limited partner backed VC arms, you're seeing bigger funds and they're raising large amounts of money and able to make bigger bets in Europe in order to perhaps mirror some of those successes in the US. So I think there is that trend. I think we've all suffered from some of the trends in the past, but looking forward, I think we've got room for a lot of optimism, and I think it's driven by the large institutional investors and they're attracting people into this market.
Okay, so on that, let's finish on a high note. I think they've been a fantastic panel. Thank you so much. Thank you also for all your questions. If you can just thank them again. And
okay, thank you very much indeed, Jane, and to all of the panel. So, when I opened the conference this morning, I talked about the importance of follow-on from the event, rather than it just being a static one-off opportunity. So we're about to hear from George Freeman, the Minister for Life Sciences. I've seen the tape already, obviously, just to make sure there weren't any swear words or anything like that, and he was thoroughly nice. One of the things he talks about in it is a desire to find out what the key points were made today, what the recommendations are, what the ideas are from all of you here. So we will, as I mentioned this morning, be writing a report about that, putting it up on our website and passing it on to George and his team. Importantly, all of the slides that people are happy to share from the speaking opportunities today, we will share with you. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be 2 videos. One video about the conference, and some of you hopefully were nobbled earlier to say things about it, and the interviews that I did with Bahija and with Nick earlier will both be available online as soon as we've had a look at them. So I've always wanted to say this, and hopefully the technology will work. So run VT.
Well, hello. I'm sorry I can't join you by person today. I was hoping very much to, and I've been held up here on parliamentary business, and I really wanted to join today's One Nucleus on Helix event on translational research, which, as many of you will know, is a subject close to my heart. I've seen the agenda and I've seen the people there today, and it's an incredibly powerful group talking about something that goes right to the heart of my mission as the UK's First Minister for Life Sciences, and to the heart of this government's programme for driving and unleashing the forces of innovation at the heart of our healthcare economy. Following the election, the Prime Minister, in reappointing me, has made very clear that the task we face is nothing less than unleashing the power of innovation into our healthcare system to achieve 2 key things: to drive up healthcare productivity so we get more health for every pound, using precision medicines, smart diagnostics, 21st century devices, data, digital health, to make sure that we're treating the right patients the right way at the right time and getting the right drugs and right treatments to the right people, and unleashing the power of genomics and data to drive that smart 21st century, better targeted, ultimately personalised precision medicine revolution. And at the heart of that, we're obviously going to have to change the way the life sciences sector and the life sciences landscape and ecosystem works. So moving away from that 20th century model of very siloed science and siloed spin-outs and siloed industry, taking a lot of the risk outside the system, requiring industry to develop innovations and bring them back to us fully de-risked, fully proven at an affordable price. And increasingly, those cost and regulatory barriers, that time to develop a drug or a device, too high, and our speed of adoption into the system, developing that critical value point for industrial partners, too slow. And so at the heart of my mission is taking time, cost and risk out of that landscape and bringing together in a genuinely translational partnership the three key elements of a 21st century life sciences ecosystem: deep science, huge clinical expertise, and industrial partnership and leadership. And in some of our most advanced translational research institutes around the country, many of them funded by the National Institute for Health Research, which I'm responsible here for at DH, doing extraordinary work, bringing those clinical, academic and industrial partnerships together. So I would urge you today to look at the best practice from some of those centres and think about what we can do to develop and roll that out across the system. Here in government, I hope since the Prime Minister launched the UK Life Sciences Strategy, you've seen our commitment to this sector, to invest in the deep science for tomorrow, in the Catapult programme over the Department of Business, in precision medicines, in cell therapy, in advanced manufacturing. And we're continuing to look at key areas like vaccines that we ought to be investing in more for the future. Then on the translational side, the biomedical catalyst scheme, which has been genuinely catalytic in bringing speed to that partnering and to help bring industry co-investment in support of a more rapid translation of breakthroughs into clinical practice. On the financial side, moving upstream, the patent box, the EIS and the various grant and tax reliefs for research. And then crucially, over on the health system, to deliver that core vision in our life science strategy, to support industry at the Department of Business, but crucially to get the Department of Health and the NHS driving a second cylinder, driving in the clinical expertise to underpin 21st century translational medicine and pulling through innovation more quickly into the system. And that's why, since being appointed last year, I've been very focused on taking time, cost and risk out of that pathway. And the Accelerated Access Review is all about looking at how can we do what the Americans successfully did a few years ago. 43% of new chemical entities now coming through some form of fast tracking. So we're asking three key questions. Can we make the UK landscape a quicker place to get access to patients for research? Can we secondarily think about how the NHS could drive commissioning-based evaluation, new models of procurement and reimbursement based on better intelligence and data, better genomic profiling on which treatments are working in which patient groups? And thirdly, can we roll innovation out across the system more quickly, knocking over the barriers, putting in place new incentives? And at the heart of that is a theme that is at the heart of your agenda today, de-risking this landscape. I'm very clear that given the pressures on our healthcare system, £22 billion of efficiencies have got to be found within 5 years, in year. We're going to have to unleash the power of digital and data and precision medicines and technology to help deliver that. We are unlikely to be a top premium retail price payer, so we're going to have to find and unleash some other value proposition. And I think that's going to be around making available that extraordinary research infrastructure at the heart of our NHS and our extraordinary science and our support for industry. It's a huge and I believe vital endeavour at the heart of this country, and I'm hugely pleased to see the work that you're doing there today. I'm only sorry I can't join you this evening for a drink. I look forward to hearing the results of today and your recommendations, and I wish you all the very best with the important work that you're doing.
Excellent. Do we give George a round of applause? Let's give him a round of applause. And I can tell him we gave him a round of applause. So, obviously he's not here to answer questions, but I have a hotline to him. If anybody has any particular thoughts, points, recommendations, and you don't already have his email address, let me know, and I'll be very happy to introduce you. Absolutely no problem. So a couple of final words from me. I mentioned this morning that we were already putting our plans in place for next year. Next year's event is on the 28th of June. It's a suitable amount of space between us and Bio, which is always really important. So 28th of June, back here at the Welcome Genome Campus. And our opening keynote speaker, I'm delighted to announce here for the first time, will be Sir John Saville, Chief Executive of MRC. Really delighted that he's confirmed and happy for me to make that announcement today. So finally, all it leaves me to do is to say a few thank yous, if you will tolerate me for a few more moments. Firstly, our advisory board. Two of our advisory board were on the last panel, Jane and Hakan. Without our advisory board, the conference would not exist. It's really important for us that the conference content is credible, that it's current, that it's timely, and that it's relevant for you. And One Nucleus, as the team, we have our expertise, but we don't claim to have all the answers. So our advisory board for this event is absolutely crucial. Of course, all of our sponsors and our supporters and our various helpers. We've had people fly in from the States to help us today with mics and all that kind of thing. Really important to thank all of our keynotes from this morning. I thought they got the conference off to a great and really inspiring start, reminding us all of the importance of having the patient at the heart of what we're all doing, I imagine. All of our chairs, all of our speakers. And really importantly to all of our exhibitors and our artists. They've all helped to make it happen. A couple more thank yous. My lovely One Nucleus team, three people in particular. Hannah Merriman, who's our marketing manager. Aline Charpentier, who put the foundations in place for this year's conference before she left us at the end of the year to go and have little Gustav, who's now 6 months old. Aline's returned to us, but in her place, we were incredibly fortunate to have Nadia Shivji join us from the University of Cambridge towards the end of last year, and she has been spearheading and pivotal to the operation today. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to all three of them, but in particular to Nadia. And finally, even more important than all of those people is all of you for coming. Thank you for making it happen. Thank you for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules. You all deserve a drink. I wish you all a very safe trip home. Let us know what you thought of the conference. And the drinks will be back in the hall, but we go through the posh entrance this time. So look for the pillars and head through to a gin and tonic. Thank you very much and good evening.